Howdy, folks. Today we're talking about how mobile workflows and AI tools are transforming the way we create with Photoshop in 2025 and beyond. So, how do you future-proof your creative process? Well, you'll find out right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers and creatives of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nutz, and if you're like me and you enjoy free podcasts and YouTube content, you can become a supporter of the show by buying us a coffee over on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us create more exciting episodes for you. But, of course, you're more than welcome to say no hard feelings. Just know that your support really does make a difference. And don't forget, you can now sign up for the Camera Shake newsletter over on www.camerashakepodcast.com to get photography insights, guest highlights, and tips delivered straight to your inbox. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, Photoshop instructor, designer, photographer, and Adobe MAX speaker. It's the one and only Rob De Winter. Rob, man, how's it going on? How's it going on? What's going on? That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's going fine. Thanks. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me here on this podcast. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Rob, for those of you who don't know, just give us a helicopter overview over your creative background.
Yeah, so actually I started once as a primary school teacher. So that was my basic education, actually, what I did. And then I was always interested in designing. So I also play music in bands. And of course, someone needs to design the website and the artwork for the bands. So that's how I started with graphic design. So I didn't teach a lot on primary schools. Then I started designing. I did a design university, and then started designing freelance. And then, I missed the teaching again, and that was how I was, teaching again, but then in graphic design. So that's how it started. Yeah.
It's funny how very often when you look at educators, especially when it comes to people who educate on YouTube and platforms like that, for example, very often have some kind of educational background. Like you say, you used to be a primary school teacher.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. And also, together with that, also a lot of people make music, and that's also the way how they get into graphic design most of the times. And I really liked teaching, but not so much on primary schools. So that's why combining teaching and graphic design, completely made me happy. Actually, I'm now doing this for 15, or maybe 16, 17 years or something like that. I still like it a lot. And also, teaching on conferences like Adobe MAX keeps it exciting also, because I mostly taught small groups of people and then started doing conferences. And then, you can teach for so many people and also on bigger conferences. And that keeps it nice. Yeah.
Do you think your experience as a primary school teacher has made it easier for you to teach larger groups, like at a conference, for example?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, especially I still remember the first time when I had to teach, I think 5-year-olds or something like that, 5 really small kids. It was the first time teaching, and that was really, I found it really exciting as a 17-year-old. And then because you do it so many times, it really helps you to get used to speaking in front of groups. And then after that, also with playing music in front of big audiences, that also helps, that the teaching helps you to be less nervous. But still, every time a conference like Max is kind of special every time, but it doesn't make me that nervous anymore. I was still really nervous the first time when I did it, but it definitely helps. Yeah.
I find exactly the same thing. I mean, I have a history in music as well, and playing in front of audiences is one of these things. The classroom teaching things. I also have a little bit of history in classroom teaching. I used to teach guitar to classes in primary schools, and I remember I found it very difficult to get used to that. I've been teaching, one-on-one in small groups for years, but teaching a class of 30 brings with it a whole bunch of other difficulties, like behavior, for example, and things like that.
Yeah, that was the most difficult part, I think, when you're still so young. When you start teaching on primary schools, you're 21 when you finish your main education, and then that I found it very difficult. Yeah, to keep to keep everything together. But you get used to it, and then teaching adults is much easier because people when you teach Photoshop or when you teach InDesign, Illustrator, people mostly really like what you do, and they keep their attention all the time. So that makes it much easier. Yeah.
And of course, they're there because they want to be there. Like with kids in the primary school classes, like they probably don't. Half of them don't want to be there in the first place.
Exactly. So so I actually like a little bit more what I'm doing right now. Yeah, because everyone likes what I'm saying most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, it's super interesting because how do you what do you base your workshops on? Let's say at Adobe MAX, is it based on like a final end product? Like, for example, a friend of mine, Russell, he did a thing on movie posters, for example. Let's say, like today we're going to create a movie poster with, I don't know, knowing Russell, probably pirates or circus people or something like that. Or is it based on a particular technique? Like, for instance, today we're going to learn how to use the generative fill, for example.
Well, it's a bit of both. Well, the first time when I started at Max was about, I started with Illustrator and Animate. So to animate infographics, that was the first making them interactive. That was also my first pitch for Adobe Max. So I did a proposal, and then I got invited because I liked it. It was first making icons in Adobe Illustrator, then making an infographic out of that, and then making it interactive in Adobe Animate, and that was something people really liked. But nowadays I'm also doing Photoshop Essentials, and that's really starting with Photoshop from the basics, and then in 90 minutes I'm trying to teach all the basic stuff that people need to know about Photoshop, and that's also very rewarding because when people get into that group, they most of the time are really not so good in Photoshop, but they know other Adobe products, so that makes it a little bit easier to get started. But still, when you have to get from 0 to 100% in 90 minutes, that's quite a challenge. But that's also one of the topics that I do. I also do something for Russell this year, and that will be about creating tarot cards. So that's also something special. But I'm not sure how that will go. But that will be something very exciting, I think. Yeah.
I always wonder what basic subject matter he's going to come up with next. It's always interesting. When you're Vikings, then it's what was it, Cirque du Soleil? Whatever the next thing's going to be it's definitely always interesting. Now, one thing I've noticed over the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, is that 15, 20 years ago, it was easy to sort of draw a line and differentiate between, I'm a photographer and therefore I need to know maybe how to use Photoshop, right? And I'm a graphic designer and I need to know how to use Illustrator, for example. Yep. But over the last 5 years, I would say, it's really become apparent that even as a photographer, you need to understand and able to use so many more software packages, and you need to be able to kind of dabble in so many more creative disciplines, in a sense, in order to really function, in this world of social media. And, you now, for instance, the thing we're discussing a lot on this podcast is, this connection to video. Now, if you're a photographer in 2025, if you don't have at least a basic understanding of video editing, you're going to be at an advantage. 20 years ago, there was a clear cut, not even 10 years ago, there was a clear cut line between photographers and videographers. Now it more and more merges into one thing. Now, you wear many hats as a graphic designer, as a photographer, and so on. How do these, for you, how do these different creative disciplines influence each other?
Yeah, that's a kind of a difficult question, but I think, first of all, I think you have to to be interested in the things you want to do. Because if you're a photographer and you don't like to design logos, for example, or create social media posts, maybe social media posts is a bit of a difficult one, because everyone needs to be on social media maybe to show your work. But yeah, I think it also needs to come a little bit from interest, and I think most of the time people who do photography are interested in something like design or beautiful things or photography. But yeah, like you say, you do need to know a little bit about design to type some text on a photo, or you need to place a logo on a photo, or at least need to know a little bit about a few aspects. But I can also imagine that some photographers maybe don't even like to make videos, so or don't like video editing. I always tend to myself. I always like the just still images the most, mostly actually. So I do a lot of videography also to make videos for Adobe, and I do editing, but I still like the non-moving things more actually. That's something that always catches my interest, and I always try to focus on that also. But yeah, I think yeah, it's always nice to know a little bit about everything, at least, well, when you like it, because yeah, when you don't like it, it's very difficult to get your attention to that part. But yeah, I like a lot of things myself. I like photos. I like Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, Lightroom, Premiere Pro. I also like animation, as long as it's creative. Yeah.
One of the real advantages when it comes to the Adobe Creative Suite, just generally, the suite of software packages, as it were, is that there's so many commonalities. This has always been, this is what I've always found, because I started with Photoshop, I don't know, back in what was it, Photoshop 2 or something? I mean, it was like a long time ago. But then, eventually when I started using things like Premiere Pro, for example, I realized there are a lot of elements that are very similar. It's not completely new.
No.
And I've always enjoyed it. Yeah, the Illustrator is the same thing. Like, I'm terrible at Illustrator, but I'm I'm starting to see the need to get into it a little bit more. But I'm starting to see the similarities there as well.
Yeah. That's the thing. I was always very happy that my school, my graphic design school, I did, was very focused on all the software. So like also Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. And I also know a lot of people who only use Photoshop for everything, and that's just not the thing you can do. But because designing a logo in Photoshop is not a good idea. But so many people really focus on their own product, only on Photoshop or only on Illustrator, and but I most of the time say, okay, you can just better learn both of them, but realize that they're just different kinds of software. One software is designed around vector design, and the other one is around pixel design, and that makes that it looks a little bit the same when you open the software. All the tools look the same, but they work in a completely different way. And once you know that, then it's then you don't have to hate Illustrator anymore, or you don't have to hate Photoshop, because it's also the other way around. People who work with Illustrator mostly don't like Photoshop because they're so used to the way of working. When they draw something, it makes a layer automatically. Photoshop doesn't do that. You always have to do it yourself. So they're just differences. But once you know them, it's very easy to get used to it. It's the same with Premiere Pro. People always get stuck in the interface, so they know the tools a little bit, but then all the panels mix up, and then you get lost. And yeah, so it's every software has its own little thing that makes it difficult for new users. But once you know it, it's not so difficult anymore. Yeah.
There's also a thing about your own personal workflow. I think for me, when it comes to video editing, I sort of years and years and years ago. This goes back, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15 years, something like that. I switched from Premiere Pro to Final Cut, and I just found that for me that seemed to work better because it aligns more with my workflow just generally. Although that being said, the projects I work on now are a lot more complicated than they were back then. So probably it won't make much of a difference anymore, to be honest. But so what was the thing that drew you to Photoshop initially as a creative?
Oh, that was for me. Photoshop always felt like magic. Actually, when I saw it, and I think I already saw work from Eric Johansson. Do you know him? He makes composite images with photos he shoots himself with his Hasselblad camera.
Oh, I think I know. Yes, I think I know even. Yeah.
It's a bit like Escher design. So he was born in Sweden, but now lives in Czech Republic. I think in Prague he lives now, and but he makes beautiful artwork, and I always found it magic, like playing with images and bringing things together and making composition images, and then make it look like fairy tale images, for example. That was really something that drew my attention. So that was what drew me to Photoshop, the magic, and it still feels like magic. Photoshop, actually, to me, it's maybe also something that Russell Brown also, when he talks about Photoshop, he always he just breathes this magic of the software, actually, and that's really something that still keeps me going. Because you can just play with light, you can play with images, you can play with situations, and you can build your own thing from scratch, but with images. Because I always feel like when you work with Illustrator, for example, it's more like drawing, and you have to come up with something yourself. The canvas is empty when you start, and then you have to come up with something. While when you go to Photoshop, you open a photo most of the time, and then you already have something, and you're going to do something with it. You can remove things, and you can bring things in that document. Yeah, it's still magic. Yeah, that's what's still
There's a thing about Photoshop. This is the thing I tell you, and I had a very, very similar experience, because this is exactly the thing that drew me to Photoshop originally, was the fact that you can composite things together and make them look real or photorealistic, and I think that's, to me, that was the thing that I originally found. It blew my mind, like you can create something that actually looks like an actual photo, like it was actually there. And it's not a drawing, which is the exact point, if you compare something to a drawing. In a drawing, you always know it's not real because it's been drawn. Exactly. But in a composite, the whole goal is to make it look photorealistic. And at that point, it's like, whoa, okay, we're creating a parallel world here. Exactly. There's always been a magic about it.
And it's also sometimes a bit silly, because you can just be here, like me here in this room, and you sit behind your computer, and you can build crazy things, very funny things also. Sometimes I find myself laughing out loud just by myself, because I'm creating something that I really find very funny. So that's it's always keeping you busy, and it's also nice that you can keep learning, because people still find new things in Photoshop by combining all the thousands of tools that you have in Photoshop. Like frequency separation was one of the things that was not invented, well, maybe 10 years ago or something like that. It's not so old, like retouching your face, or retouching furniture or fabric, and they just found it out by combining things together, and then it just worked. And that's still something that's you keep learning. You never stop learning with Photoshop.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, You're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps.
I mean, that's the thing. That's also, in a sense, that's the crux of it as well, because especially in the beginning, it seems incredibly confusing that you can, because Photoshop is famous for, being able to do the exact same thing in like 20 different ways. You always go like, in the beginning, you go, I don't understand why, why not have one button for one thing and that's it. Later on, however, you sort of realize that the power of Photoshop is exactly the fact that you can do things in 20 different ways, because it gives you so many ways of combining them with other things and creating, bigger and better results.
And everyone can make whatever they like, and sometimes it's not the fastest way, because I also wrote a few books in which I interviewed people like Eric Johansson, but also other people who work with Photoshop regularly, and they all have their own workflows. Like Eric Johansson, he makes the most beautiful things, but he always selects his images with the magnetic lasso. And that's such an outdated thing, actually. But he finds it so.
Yeah,
I hate the magnetic lasso, actually, because you have so many other ways to select things. But he just likes it because of the feeling of control he has. And of course, I'm not going to tell Eric Johansson how he has to work with Photoshop, because he makes so many beautiful things. But everyone has his own way of working with it, and all the artists that I spoke to, some of them didn't use layer masks, but they still can make everything they like, and it's when it's beautiful and they make their living out of it. Well, who am I to say how they have to work with Photoshop? So but it's very funny. Yeah,
that's the thing. I mean, the magnetic lasso. I'm glad you brought it up, because I'm also one of these people who love the magnetic lasso, and because I have a love-hate relationship with the pen tool. That's the thing, pen tool and me not getting on magnetic lasso. Let's go. This is the thing. But I'm saying that, but of course there are now, in a sense, much more powerful selection methods available that are powered by AI that really have meant that I've used things like the magnetic lasso, for example, less and less, because in a lot of situations I just don't need to, and it's quicker to
just one click selections almost. Yeah.
There's many things, many methods that I used to use as a matter of routine. For example, in my work, that I've completely switched the way I do things, because it's just quicker. Frequency separation is actually an interesting thing. So I still use frequency separation, and I like the process a lot. The quick shout out to Lisa, because she's literally taught me everything I know about frequency separation. But
I think I also learned. I think I also learned frequency separation from Lisa. I think she taught me. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it a Creative Life course by any chance?
No, I think it was a Max session.
Right.
I think, but I'm not sure. I saw it somewhere online. Maybe it was that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic course. I had to watch that course several times, because the first time I watched it went like literally over my head. But yeah, frequency separation is a very powerful tool for skin retouching, and I use it virtually all the time. Although now, of course, there are AI tools that at least take some of the heavy lifting off of you. I have to say, at this point, I haven't found anything where I would say that's just one thing, press one button and it does it perfectly. I haven't found that yet. I always need to go in and do a little bit of hand retouching at least. But I find that it's definitely sped up my workflow massively. If I'm retouching a portrait, it takes me half the time now, easily half the time.
Yeah, with frequency separation, or also with the AI tools that you also have, like the remove tool, for example.
Yeah, so the remove tool is really good. I use sort of a mix between a software called Apathy, which is really good. It's actually really good. It's really good for things like eyes, for example. Eyes and teeth, it does it really good. The skin, it does a really decent job, but there are usually sort of things that I personally want to go in and just fix a few things by hand after that. But that being said, it'll then take me literally 2 minutes to just fix those things afterwards, and then I'm done. So it hasn't entirely eliminated the need for me to go into Photoshop to do some final retouching, but it has definitely sped up the process.
I think
immensely.
so. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So sometimes you can do things with plugins. So you can also do a lot of things in Lightroom right now. Also, without going to Photoshop, things you would usually go to Photoshop, like selecting the sky or selecting persons. You can now do that right within Lightroom. So in some ways, for photographers, it is not always necessary to go to Photoshop anymore.
Oh,
Except
absolutely.
If you want to combine things, or if you want to stack images, or there are many ways to, many reasons to go to Photoshop still, but not for everyone. So
You're absolutely right. And so on a general basis, unless I'm doing some it's more like high quality work, actually a lot of the time, you're right, there's absolutely no need. The tools in Lightroom have come on so massively. And more recently, I'm actually really happy about the remove tool in Lightroom that's working so much better than it used to. It used to be terrible. Now it's actually really quite good. So that was one of the main reasons, especially on on quick edits where I still had to go to Photoshop to remove bits. Now I half the time don't really have to do that anymore, which is really good. The thing that I find personally really fascinating, how these workflows have now moved over to mobile devices like phones and iPads. I know you wrote the book on Photoshop on iPad a little while ago. What are the advantages of doing your edit workflow on let's say an iPad?
Well, I also switched to Lightroom on my iPhone quite a lot, but I think an iPad is also, the software is the same. If you use Lightroom on an iPhone or an iPad, that doesn't matter that much. But I like the bigger screen of an iPad. You get some especially if you have high resolution photos. I think it edits it a bit better. But I also like the mobile workflow a lot, and I think especially younger people do everything on their phone. If I look at my nieces, for example, they're 11 and to 17 years old, and they do everything on their phone, like even drawing with their fingers. It's crazy. And but also when you make photos, there's with my camera, for example, you can transfer photos so easily from your camera to your phone, and then open them in Lightroom, and then edit all the raw photos, and most of the time you're also sharing it on phones. When you go to Instagram or for example or Facebook, and then sharing your photos there, you see it on your device, but also share it on your device. And most of the time, people are also opening it on their device, and or seeing your photo on Instagram. And what I also like about the iPad is that it feels it feels really like you're inside your photo. Yeah, it's a bit difficult to explain, but if you have your Apple Pencil, for example, and then retouch things on your iPad, it feels like you're really, it feels more like you're into your photo more than when you edit it on a desktop. It feels like a boxed environment. But sometimes I still miss the desktop a little bit, like your mouse, or quickly clicking and dragging your files to another location, for example. But still, it's a very, very easy workflow. Editing your photo in Lightroom, sending it to Photoshop on the iPad, and also iPhone right now, and then doing some quick edits, like making composites maybe. That's really, really nice. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I find the same thing with my 14-year-old daughter. She's been drawing on iPad for the last couple of years, and I actually can't remember which app she uses. It's completely escaped me now. But she does some really elaborate, what's the word? She does some very complicated drawing stuff on it. And the interesting thing with her is she seamlessly seems to be able to switch from drawing with pencil on paper to the iPad, and there seems to be no barrier whatsoever. Yep. And I observed her drawing an eye. She did some eye studies the other day. She was drawing eyes and pupils and things. And And I just found it fascinating how she works with an Apple Pencil, but how she just seamlessly and effortlessly, zooms in with a hand gesture, gets into the details, zooms out. She's just so in tune with that user interface and the device itself that it's really it was really a pleasure to watch, because for me, being old, it's like, okay, I understand the things that I can do, but it's not quite as fluent, if you know what I mean. I watch her and it's like, you go.
And even on a phone, maybe is she also drawing on her phone, or is it mostly iPad?
So drawing she does on an iPad, and I think it's the size of the screen. And what she does use her phone to edit photos, though, and that's really something I have to say I find that very useful. I use Lightroom, in particular Lightroom on iPhone a lot.
Yeah, it's a fantastic app. It's so well designed.
Yeah,
and so easy. If you use the new profile, so there's when you go to profiles and then you have this automatic color profile. Usually it's automatically on I think Adobe Color or something like that. But you can switch to an automatic one, and that's also something I use now regularly. It's just one click, and then your photo automatically gets the right colors. So not always, but it gets close, and yeah, I really like it. It gets a lot of out of your photo automatically also.
Yeah, as I've created a lot of my own little profiles and my own little presets on Lightroom, because there's certain things that I like to do. When I edit a photo, and so I don't have to go through the same process every time. It just gives it that sort of base look, and then I can start from there. And I find that super, super useful. It's this thing where, and I do use it predominantly, I have to say, when I, let's say I have a shot, I want to get that out onto social media really quickly. I just want to give it a quick edit. I'll run it through Lightroom or mobile, and then give it an edit, and then put it out there pretty much straight away. How do you think mobile workflows like this on iPad, on iPhone, will in the future be, or to what extent do you think will that play a role for a professional workflow?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually. I'm thinking about this quite some time, and it also depends a little bit on the people who are using it. Of course, if you look at kids right now, like until maybe 20, 25 years old, they do everything on their phone. So I think when they start using this kind of software, they probably want to do everything on their phone, and they also use so many apps for everything. They have an app for all the things that they want to do. But maybe also on when you look at graphic design schools, they tend to use Photoshop and Lightroom on desktop. So maybe it also depends a little bit on what kind of education you get, and how you get educated. So, but I tend to think that maybe in the future people will do more on their phone. But I also think that once they see how well you can see everything on a big screen, on just a big monitor, that they also like that a lot. But because they're still young and they don't have the money to buy a big monitor and a big screen and a big desktop, they do everything on the device they have, and then so maybe it will be a bit of both. I think. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't give a clear answer on that, but yeah,
there's some interesting
so many things.
Yeah, there's some interesting experiences I've had. Again, and I'm saying this. This really comes from a point of me observing what my younger daughter does, or my youngest daughter does. And I noticed a little while ago, I gave her a graphics tablet. Okay, like a traditional graphics tablet, and she was using it for a little while, and at some point I said, like, "Oh, are you still using your graphics tablet?" And she goes, like, "Oh no, not really, because it's kind of weird, like having to draw with a pencil." And I said, "Oh, well, I thought you'd like it because you do it all the time, on your iPad." Yes. And she goes, like, "Yeah, but I've got to have my eyes here on the screen, and I'm drawing down there."
Exactly, that's the point. Yeah.
And it's a disconnection there, or disconnect.
Yeah, but I see that with many people actually, also adults who are used to work with a mouse. Many of them don't like the graphics tablet. Somehow I don't understand it, because the first time when I used the graphics tablet, was just able to use it immediately. But when I see adults using graphic design tablets, it's like a Wacom tablet. They sometimes love it and sometimes they hate it. So it's yeah, maybe it takes some time to learn. I'm not sure, but yeah, it depends also a little bit on the person sometimes.
It's one of these things where I think like, well, I remember, if I think back, I'm old enough to remember the change in technology in a number of different fields, like music being one of them. I remember, when I was little, I remember there was record players and CD players, and then eventually there were, eventually you could record on CDs. That was crazy. And then there were DVDs, And I remember saying to a friend of mine, because he said like, at some point you'll be able to record your movies onto DVD. And I remember at that point I said like, that's never going to happen. That is never going to happen. Impossible. Of course, about 9 months later, there you are.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's very nice to know all of that. I also remember that we had very slow computers and then recording music on it, and then every time it became a little bit better and better and better, and then yeah, you were able to record everything on your computer yourself, and then all the plugins and all the strings plugins, and yeah, it's really nice to see how everything evolved, and that's also maybe one of the things that's happening in the future. Maybe when you edit your images. Well, for example, in Lightroom, it's a lot of one-click buttons that you have right now to just automatically edit your image, and you just have to drag a few sliders to make it almost perfect. But also with AI, I think that there will change a lot of things also in Photoshop, for example, but also on your phone. That now we need we need a mouse and we need a graphic design tablet to select all the things and to bring things together. But maybe I think that we're pretty close to a point where you can just say, okay, I have for example, a hand of tomatoes, and a few of the tomatoes are still green or maybe yellow, that you just can say, okay, make all the tomatoes red, without making selections. You can just add a prompt and then say, okay, I want to have this with good quality. It's already possible to do it that way, and so maybe in the future we don't need so many tools anymore, because we can do it with simpler selection tools, and you can also easily use them on a phone. Probably when you just have a phone, you can enter a prompt, or you can tell your phone, like speaking in the microphone, and say, okay, I want to have this image, I want to have it in the background, or I want to have only red tomatoes, or I want to have it will become much easier, and that also will probably be one of the things that make people work on their phone more and more.
That's one of, that kind of brings up an interesting sort of philosophical question, which is, you have two camps of people, I think, generally speaking. On one hand, you've one group of people who would say like, well, it's as long as you can translate what's in your imagination, onto the image in whatever medium that might be, then that is basically you can realize your creative artistic vision by any means possible. That's that is perfect. And then you've got the other group of people who go like, well, as an artist, you need the imagination, but you also need the technical skill and know-how, which you now seem to not need anymore, because now you can just use words, and you make words and prompts, language prompts, your tools. Is that ability of manipulating imagery with words and prompts and language, is that enhancing, is that giving us creative freedom so that we can achieve more and realize more of our creative vision? Or is it limiting us as artists because now there's no skill required, in inverted commas? What do you think?
Well, I think the most important thing is creativity in your mind, like also a skill set that you know what. It's also a philosophical question. What is good design? Of course, we're all a little bit. Well, we've seen a lot of design, and that's why we know that what is good typography, for example. That's also something that can be taught to a computer, I think, in some way. But creative people, when you went to art school or when you went to graphic design school, you learned a skill. And every time when I see people that have already have a skill work with AI tools, they make so much better artwork than people who don't have the skills. So I think it's also a kind of an interest. Some people are interested in design. They are interested in making beautiful things. And some people now get the chance to also work with these kinds of things, but maybe they just like the technology. But then in a few months, maybe they're not interested anymore because that's not the thing they really like. So I think in the end, the creative people who are really creative, they will still end up being the creative, and on the other side, the people who now start to make their own images, they will probably find out that they don't like creating because they like, maybe they like insurance or something like that, or they like a completely different kind of work. So I think in the end, well, I think AI democratizes the process a little bit, because now everyone gets they get the ability to learn another skill. Because if you don't know how to write, you can now write with AI, and when you don't know how to design an image, you can ask AI to design an image for you. But yeah, when you look online right now, all the images look the same from people who don't know how to design. They all look the same. People like to put themselves into a box, like the toy box, like the thing you see everywhere.
Oh, no.
And they all turn themselves into a Muppet. So it's not very creative, actually, but it's nice for people to try it out, and then, well, they go on to the next thing again. But when you are creative, you know how you want to manipulate an image, and I think it's not so bad, maybe, because now it's kind of difficult sometimes to make, no, well, for example, to make the tomatoes red. When you want to do that in Photoshop, it's quite difficult. You have to know all the tools. You have to know adjustment layers, and when you can ask AI to do it for you, then, well, you still have it in your mind what you want to do, and I think it's not always something bad. I think it's bad in ways when some people, well, make fake news or fake images or want to harm people with it. But that was always the case with Photoshop already, when people were able to manipulate images with Photoshop for 30 years. So it already happened. But yeah, I think it only makes the work maybe easier in some ways. But I still, well, so it's not so creative right now, because now you still need to write a prompt. In all the tools that you have online right now, there's no creative way to edit an image, like Photoshop, for example, where you can put things together. You always see the websites with a prompt field, and you can most of the time only import one image that you want to use as a reference. But for the rest, it's not very creative. If you can add all these tools into a program like Photoshop, then it becomes creative again, because you have all the ways to bring things together, and you can select things, and you can say, okay, I want to remove the glare from the windows in that area, in that particular area, or I want to make all the tomatoes red in that area, not the other tomatoes, for example. So you still need the control and the precision of the tools, and then combined with all the AI things that make it, that probably will make it a bit easier for you. I think that's the way that it will go a little bit. And then people who are not interested in image editing, they will go on with their lives and try something else. I think, yeah.
Oh, that was the thing that actually blew my mind initially when Photoshop introduced generative fill. I remember, like, was it now 2 years ago or something? And I remember, I made an image And the idea was to change that image from, it was like a lumberjack type of image, but I wanted to change it into a pirate image. So I basically decided I wanted to add things like, a parrot on my shoulder and like, gold coins and a treasure chest on the floor and what was it? A treasure map and some other, a sword and other bits and bobs. And at the time, some of those results were actually remarkably good. Some really weren't, but the map never got good result on the map. But, but things like, I remember things like, gold coins on the floor. I mean, it was totally photorealistic. There was like, this looked like it was actually there. The lighting was accurate and everything was perfect. And the beauty of it was that you could literally just select a little area, and you just basically say, create some gold coins in a treasure chest.
Yeah.
Boom, and there was.
Yeah, and as far as I know, Photoshop is the only software that's so extended that it can do all these kinds of things. Most of the tools are really basic, and I'm still so surprised that there's nothing better than the prompt field with the ability to import an image as a reference or a style reference. That there's no other, like more like a graphic user interface for design people that is so good that it can compete with Photoshop. You have a few tools, of course, that can compete with Photoshop, but it's not more AI based, not in that way, like having full control over the things you want to make, and then also the ability to do it with AI. Photoshop is still the only software that does it pretty well, and I think it will only get better in the future. That it will give you more and more tools to make the things easier for beginners, that you don't need all the skills, all the tools from Photoshop, all the things that are in there since 1989. I think that was the first year that Photoshop was released. Still, all the things that were in there are still in there, and I think I think some tools can just be removed, I think, in the future, because you don't need them anymore. Yeah.
That's the interesting thing, because at the moment there's almost like an explosion of AI plugins that are coming out. Whether it's Evoto or Aperture, Luminar and things, and they're very much focused on particular workflows. Like, let's say if you are a portrait photographer and you need to do a lot of skin retouching, eyes, blah blah, then you have Evoto and Aperture, Portrait Pro, for example, which has some great options to do exactly that job. But that is what they do. They do this one job, and that's pretty much it.
And it's also a lot of, I think it's also a lot of these tools are slider based, like you can drag sliders.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like designing for me.
Yes,
so
totally different.
I like this. Yeah, I just want to paint something, or I want to draw something on a canvas, and then say, okay, I made the shape of a banana, for example. Now turn this into a banana, for example. Just that you still feel like I have the control over the things that I'm creating, and that's slider based doesn't feel like designing for me. I want to have the feeling of being like painting or putting things together, and that's still not. I think it can be easily made, actually, all these kinds of things. But it's still, for me, Photoshop is still the way to go. Yeah.
That's why I always come back to Photoshop when it comes to dodging and burning, because I just feel like that. With a graphics tablet and with a pen, it's easier for me to shape contours and create the things the way I want them to be.
Yeah.
Just using a slider, to me, feels like I'm losing too much control.
Yes. Also, just entering a prompt is also like you don't have control over the things that it does. It's it is. You never feel like I have full control over the things that you want to do. If I want to make some shadows there, you can just paint, like you say. You can just paint with a graphics tablet. But the thing I find difficult for beginners is that when you teach beginners how to do that, that's very difficult, because they have to know the concept of adjustment layers. They have to or dodging and burning. It depends a little bit on how you do it. But I tend to do it with adjustment layers if you want to do it non-destructively. That concept is very difficult for beginners to learn, and sometimes people work for 15 years with Photoshop and they never understood the concept of masking, adjustment layers, and dodging and burning, how to do it. And then, so I think that process can be made much easier with AI tools, like or with other tools maybe. But yeah, I think it needs to be a little bit easier, because we now get a new generation of people who just are used to entering a prompt, and they don't like the process of learning so much before they can have an end result. They want to make it easier. So I think Photoshop also needs to be a little bit easier in that way, maybe. Yeah.
I think one of the big advantages for me when it comes to using plugins, for example, is volume work. For instance, because retouching one image or a small number of images in Photoshop is amazing. Retouching 100, 200, 300 images, at that point you're getting to a point where you need something that can do the job quicker, and that's where things like Portrait Pro or Evoto or Aptiv come in, because they can give you, it's the 80-20 rule. Can you get 80% of the result with 20% of the effort or the input? Yeah. And this is where those solutions, in my view, this is where they absolutely shine. Because you can just bang out tons of images in no time at all, and they all look really good.
So it's more like retouching multiple images at one time. You can just say, okay, I want to do all the same edits on the same photos, a bit like Lightroom maybe, but then on more specific things like retouching faces or
That's actually how I use the AI mask feature in Lightroom a lot. Yeah. So this is basically, for those listening or watching, I don't necessarily know what it is. Basically, you can create AI masks of things like the skin, for example. Imagine if you're retouching a portrait, you create an AI mask of skin, eyes, hair, things, clothes, and you can edit that, and then you can literally copy and paste these very same masks and settings onto a whole boatload of other images. And although maybe the pose has changed in the next shot, imagine if you're shooting if you're editing 50 headshots, it's all the same person, they're wearing the same thing, same lighting, but it's also different poses. Now you can just edit one and then just copy and paste, and it adjusts everything. That's incredible.
It just detects the faces on all the images, and then goes through them. There's a face, and then retouch them the same way. That's amazing that's possible. Yeah,
that's absolutely unbelievable. And if you're doing something I always think if you're doing something like, take school photos, for example. It's a good example. You wouldn't retouch a school photo to the same standard as a movie poster or something. But now you have the power to do a lot more, a lot better, a lot quicker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really and then plugins also come to the rescue if you have to do very specific things like you say. But a lot of things. I think a lot of photographers are happy with all the batch editing with Lightroom also.
Batch editing is huge. That's absolutely the batch editing in Lightroom is the best thing in since sliced bread for me, because I do a lot of it.
And do you usually use Lightroom Classic also, or is it Lightroom like the newer Lightroom, like Lightroom without Classic?
It's Lightroom Classic. So when I work on my on my main Mac behind me, I work in Lightroom Classic, but I do like Lightroom on iPad quite a bit because I've recently got into that. Are there any specific creative projects where you would say actually iPad might be at an advantage compared to a traditional desktop?
Yeah, I think when you're that's one particular thing. Of course, if you're on holidays, for example, and you go on vacation and then traveling, and you travel with your camera and your iPad with you, that's one of the cases that I use myself a lot for. But also, like I said, when you want to be more, when you're in touch with your image, like that, then I feel like, okay, when I really want to be creative, it feels more creative. Russell Brown said it really well, actually. It's like when you work on your iPad, sometimes with Photoshop, you don't have all the tools most of the time because it's limited. It's still full Photoshops that's on your iPad, but they can turn things on or off because they have to redesign the whole iPad interface. So some things are not there on the iPad. But because you don't have all the tools on your iPad, it feels a little bit like being on a campsite. Like when you go to a campsite and then you boil an egg on this very basic gas fire. Well, it takes a long time. It's not as easy as when you cook an egg at home. But the egg on the campsite tastes most of the time much nicer than the egg that you boil at home with all the stuff that you have. So that also feels a little bit, for me, that was exactly the feeling that how I feel when I work on an iPad. For me, it doesn't feel as fluent as when I work on the desktop, but it feels more like camping. Like it tastes sometimes. The things you make on your iPad taste better when you do it on an iPad than when you do it on your desktop. Yeah, I feel I'm more into the image, and I think also in professional workflows, when you shoot on location, when you shoot concerts, for example, and you don't want to walk with your laptop all the time, but quickly want to edit your images, you can easily take your iPad with you and then transfer all the images to your iPad and then do all the editing work there. Yeah, you can most of the things do on your iPad nowadays. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly the thing. I think in terms of speed of conversion, in a sense, it's unbelievable. Like getting it. You gave the holiday example, and I find that's actually that's really where it comes in. It becomes really powerful because my experience is always, let's say I take a camera on holiday with me, maybe I shoot a lot of photos, but then by the time I get home, if I then have to upload them onto my computer and start editing, half of it will never happen.
Yeah.
It just never will, because by the time you're back from holiday, work starts again, and life goes back to normal, and you just don't have time. But I like to do these things, in the moment. Like I'm one of these people. I like to shoot something, and then I like to sit by the pool, or on the porch or something, and edit it. Yeah, and then rather than reading a book even.
Yeah, and it goes, and time goes so fast when you do that. It's like when you're on an airport and you have to wait for a few hours.
Yeah.
And you have your iPhone with you, and then start editing the images from your vacation or something like that. Then time goes so quick, and it's also I'm also finding that when I edit vacation photos on my iPhone. Just in Lightroom Mobile, it's I'm not spending so much time on every photo. It's more like I want to edit it, and then when it looks right, then I stop and continue to the next photo. But I'm not spending so much time on it actually. It's more like, okay, a little bit more shadows, a little bit more highlights, maybe editing the sky a little bit, or the main subject on the photo. But that's all. I'm not doing so many things. But it's also because you can do so many things so quickly. So I really like the process on holidays. Yeah. Also, like you say, when you come back home, you don't have time to edit the photos anymore. And now I'm just standing somewhere in the mountains, and then I transfer the photos to the iPhone and then edit them. And then you can, if you want, you can even post them online.
I think that's exactly. That's for me. That's the thing. It's like the speed of converting them from being on your camera to actually being online. For example, that's it's to me. It's the thing. It's because I'm extremely lazy. I'm one of these people. I'm really lazy when it comes to social media, posting stuff on social media. Unless if it's not on my phone, it most likely. Well, it's a very slim chance that it will ever see any social media platform. Unless it's on my phone already. That's
same here. Yeah, the same here. The only downside is that you have to turn off your data for your Photos app, because I once forgot it, and then I put I have Leica Q3, and they have 60 megapixels photos.
Yeah.
And then when you transfer them, so you first put them on your phone, so then they get into the Photos app on the iPhone. And then, so the Photos app was transferring them to the cloud, of course. So that was point one. And then they went into Lightroom, and Lightroom was also pulling them into the cloud. So yeah, that was twice 60 megapixel photo for every photo that I put on my phone. And it was was done with all the megabytes were gone. Especially when you go to the United States and you have a eSIM or something like that. Yeah, you can spend all your megabytes on photos. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think I'm pretty sure on my Nikon Z8 I can set it that so that it only transfers JPEGs to the phone. So at that point, and to be honest with you, a lot of the time when I'm doing mobile edits, I edit straight from a JPEG rather than from a RAW file, which a lot of the time is actually fine.
That's also fine. Yeah. Most of the time, especially when they're so large, you can perfectly edit them from JPEG. Yeah. I just feel like, okay, I need to download the DNG, for example, the RAW file, but yeah, it's not necessary actually. But I still do it. Yeah, but they're so large, like 80 megapixels for one image it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've always been sort of a RAW file proponent until I found out that a friend of mine, Scott Johnson, it's an award-winning wedding photographer. He won the wedding category at the International Photo Competition at Imaging USA last year. And it was just interesting for me to learn that he only shoots JPEG. He never shoots RAW. And yet, his shelves are filled with awards. His images are mind-blowingly stunning. I've seen them printed huge, you would never be able to tell. And so that immediately, for me, it just told me that maybe I'm a little too fixated on the format rather than actually thinking, well, wait a minute, most of the stuff or a lot of the stuff that I do, especially when I'm on holiday or something, will see the light of social media platforms, maybe, or I'll send them via WhatsApp to my mom.
Exactly, and then get compressed again. So you never,
exactly.
And then also on social media. So it's also what we are thought of. Of course, we always want to have the best quality, and then you think, okay, I really need a RAW photo, but in the end, like you say, it's not really necessary. And also, I think sometimes the processing that's done on the camera itself is also pretty good most of the time. And most of the time you lose that completely when you import the RAW again, and then so maybe I should also. I'm going to try it myself. Download all the JPEGs. Yeah.
I've recently seen you doing some tutorials on Adobe Firefly.
Oh yeah.
What is the thing that's attracted you to that? Because I think I saw you do some video with Firefly.
Well, I think the five. Yes. Oh yeah. I also did a video. Yeah, it was maybe it was about fluffy text, was it? Typography.
I think so.
That was so animated. So I always like typography things, and actually also Firefly is for me one of the AI image generators that really works well with like guidance if you're a creator. And you have some typography, for example, you create it in Photoshop or in Illustrator, and then when you want to transform that into something else, that works really well. So that's why I like Firefly a lot. I'm not sure if you have used composition reference, but you can just upload one image that guides the outlines and the depth. So if you have a type, for example, I made something with fluffy. I typed fluffy in Illustrator, made an image out of that, and then made some material that I wanted to use as a style reference. So like more like a fluffy material on a grass background. And then when you use them together, like the typography from Photoshop and the style from the image of the fluffy material, then you can create fluffy text on a grass background, for example, if you combine them together. Where I also made some like typography with in Photoshop again, and then had some material of an ice cube on a snowy background, I think, with a northern light sky background, and then when you combine them together, you have ice cube lettering in a snowy background with northern light behind it. So it's really, and then when you go to Firefly, and then to the video section, you can also animate that. So then I had the fluffy text animating like there was a breath of wind going through the hairs. So the hairs were like the fur was dancing in the wind, and yeah, that process is pretty. It still feels like creating a little bit for me, and Firefly is really good at that. Yeah, so I always like to make videos out of that. Also, mostly on LinkedIn, but also Adobe Learn, to inspire people to because it's so new. People don't see what's possible with it, and because I teach, I have some time most of the time to experiment a little bit more than people who are at work all the time, like daily. Most of the time, people don't have time to try it, and so then I always like to share it also on social media. Yeah, and try to inspire people.
What's the advantage of let's say creating tutorial videos on LinkedIn as opposed to, say, a platform like YouTube?
Well, I think LinkedIn feels a little bit faster also, so you can quickly share it. I don't put a lot of time in it. YouTube always feels for me a little bit like I have to put a lot of time in it to get it right. While actually that's not really true, of course, because you can make it as fast as a LinkedIn video, but but YouTube is, well, you can earn money from it if you and pretty easily actually if you have a few videos online. You quickly are at that point where you can earn some money. So I maybe should make some more YouTube videos. But I get I think my audience is also on LinkedIn a little bit more, like creative people and photographers, but also people who are interested in AI. So I have a lot of followers, and that follower base built up pretty quickly on LinkedIn. So it felt more rewarding somehow for me. But like Jesus, who was in the previous podcast, he is very big on YouTube, but he also does this for a very long time. But yeah, for me, it felt a little bit like I had to spend too much time on it. It felt more like sometimes I'm very busy, and then you have to also have to make time for some YouTube videos, and then sometimes LinkedIn just feels quicker. Yeah.
My advice to people is always, find the platform that you're most comfortable with, and then focus on that, rather than spreading yourself too thin across too many platforms, which is never a good idea. It's like, if you're comfortable on Facebook, but you can't really hack Instagram, stick with Facebook. If that's the happy place.
Cool. Also where your audience is. Because also on YouTube, it feels a little bit like you're competing with many other people who are making videos about Photoshop, for example. And it always feels a little bit like it needs to be like a teaching video, like you teach something. So you have to have a whole story where you teach people. Like on LinkedIn, you can just make a video without voice. You can just make something and then put some text above it. And people are reading that text first most of the time and then look at the video. That's a different way of making videos. Yeah.
What would be really cool if you could create something in Adobe Firefly, like, let's say you're creating an image of a whiskey glass with ice cubes in it, and some whiskey on a wooden table in front of a mountainous landscape at dawn somewhere in the north of Canada with snow in the background, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. Maybe some canoeists on a lake, yada, 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 right? So you come up with the idea, Firefly creates this image for you, but then spits out a PSD file with all of the elements on separate layers so that you can then go in and edit all of it separately.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. I think that will be possible. I think it's already possible to do something like that, but no one built it. I think it will be perfectly possible to make something like that, but it needs all the selection methods. And
exactly.
When you have a separate layer of a canoe, and then the background needs to be filled.
And then, I tell you what, and then to top that off, basically, just like, when you use generative fill, and it gives you 3 options. So now, not only does it create all the different elements on different layers, but it also gives you 3 options for 3 different canoes that you might want to have. How about that?
That would be great. Yeah. On the other hand, I think maybe it will go another way. Like, have you tried Project Neo, for example? Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it. Who told me about it? Tobias told me about it. That's it. But I haven't tried it.
Yeah, it's one of the 3D tools that Adobe has. So yeah, you have to see it a little bit like a very simple 3D editing and creation tool. So you can create vector images also in it, and send it to Adobe Illustrator, and then you have the vector images. But the fun thing about Neo is that you can create, for example, well, you can create a very basic 3D table, or you can create a very basic 3D banana or a whiskey glass or something else. And that doesn't have to be perfect, but you can use that as a style or as a composition reference for Firefly. So you have the very basic shapes, and then tell Firefly, okay, I want to create a table in Canada with a nice background behind it. And then it will just recognize the shapes. Like if you have a very simple cylinder, it can be the whiskey glass, for example. And Firefly will recognize that and then create a whiskey glass based on that simple shape. And then, well, you don't need layers anymore, because if you want to move the whiskey glass a little bit, you just have to move the cylinder a little bit more to the left and then say generate again, and then it will generate a new image based on the new situation. So maybe in the future you might not even need layers anymore because you can simply move all the 3D layers or the composition reference image. So maybe it goes a little bit more that way, but I'm not sure. For me, it still feels like without layers, it feels a little bit a little bit empty. You always want to have the layers to move things around, but maybe we have to think in a completely different way to edit images in the future. I'm not sure, but
yeah, the thing about layers is layers give you so many additional options rather than just moving an object. It's it's the things that you can do with adjustment layers, for example, and all the different options you have in order to not only affect one particular element in the image, but also to create situations where you can remain flexible over time, with non-destructive editing, I had a conversation with Lisa Coney some time ago, and there was because we were talking about this. This was like a good, I don't know, maybe I want to say a year and a half ago, maybe something like that. And we were talking about the emergence of AI, and I think we were talking about whether there still be a need for designers designing movie posters when you can just give it some prompts, and a bunch of still images of Batman and Superman, and just let the AI thing do its thing, and then that's that. And she made a really interesting point, and it was really a very practical point. The point where basically she said, well, you get to imagine the process of being a process of, you do some work, you then send it off to somebody to look at it, some art director, they come back to you and say, change this thing, this one element or something else. You need to then be able to go back into the file and adjust these individual elements rather than having to start the whole edit again. This is why the ability of being able to work with layers and non-destructively is so important, so that you can go back into that edit and change these things. It makes perfect sense.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, for me also. Yeah, I still can't live without layers myself, and I think maybe that will always stay a thing also in the future. But I also think that when you design newer tools, like a newer version of Photoshop or a newer version of other things, we also have to completely think out of the box, like what's also possible. Maybe because if we always keep thinking in layers, maybe we I don't know how to say this. Well, I'm still Dutch, of course. I can't find the right word for it, but maybe it's
self-limiting, probably.
Yeah, it's limiting. Yeah, that was what I'm going to say. Yeah, it's self-limiting because you always think in the old way of the thing So maybe when you think more out of the box, you can maybe also think of ways to design things layerless, and then still have the flexibility to edit all the things. If someone says, okay, I want to have this one thing changed in the image, that you're still able to do that without layers. But I'm not sure. I also haven't thought about it, but maybe it goes in that direction. Who knows? But until that, I think, and then still you still need the designer to edit that file, and you also need a designer like Lisa, for example, to come up with the right lighting and the creativity, and that we can never go without creative people with all the best tools. If you don't know how to create, and if you're not creative yourself, then you also can't make beautiful things. I think it will always be very mediocre, I think, when you don't know what you're talking about and where you're just telling AI what to do.
Exactly. I mean, a good example for me is somebody whose work I absolutely admire is Anya Anti's Photoshop work. Her work is absolutely, in terms of creativity, it's absolutely unbelievable. And really what I love about it is the idea behind it. It's just the sheer idea of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
They think, well, that's such a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that will never disappear. Well, that also reminds me of one of the things that was when I made my first book. I also had the idea of interviewing people. Like, okay, I want to interview that artist, and most of them, also like Lisa Carney was also one of them. And they said, oh yes, of course, I'm going to tell you all my techniques and all the things that I know. But I also asked a few people, and was going to tell the names, but they said, oh no, I don't want to be interviewed. I don't want to be interviewed because I don't want to tell my secrets. But I thought, okay, what secrets? Because you just use the same tools that everyone uses, and the thing you make are really special because it's you that creates the things. So even when you tell your techniques to everyone else, they're not able to make the things you make because they're not you. They don't have your ideas. They don't have your view on things, and so we all use the same techniques. We all use masking. We all use layers, but it's still the people who make it that make it special, and AI won't change that. I think it's still the people who have the ideas, and they have to be able to make exactly that idea that they have in their mind, and that will make the artist, not the tools. I think not AI and not Photoshop.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think one of part of the skill as an artist is to be able to sort of backwards engineer, a particular. Well, no matter whether it's an image, a photograph, or a piece of music, for example. Because as a musician, that's what you do all the time. You listen to a song and you go, I wonder what guitar was that? Was that a Stratocaster, or was it? That sounds like a Les Paul to me.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
Exactly, but it's this thing like where if you're trying to. Like, let's say you hear Guns N' Roses for the first time and you hear Slash playing guitar and you go like, how the heck does he do that? And you start to backwards engineer it. You start to think like, okay, well, what guitar does he play? What effects are on the guitar sound? Is it like, what kind of amp? Does it sound like a Marshall? Does it sound like a Fender? Blah, 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 blah. And then you go into the musical thing, where you go like, okay, what kind of scale is he playing? Is he playing in pentatonic scale? What kind of licks are they playing? Is he playing, are these blues licks? Is it blah, blah, blah? And you can learn a lot just by backwards engineer, something. It's the same with, a story I like to tell, and I've told it many times on this podcast, is, many, many years ago when my youngest daughter was very young, I think she must have been 4, maybe, something like that. We were at we were waiting on a platform on a train station in Germany, and some superhero movie just came out, and I think it was like an ensemble cast. Maybe it was I can't remember, but it was like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and whoever else on a poster together, right? And it was it's a movie poster, so advertising this movie, and we were waiting, and I was looking at it, and I realized that although this looked like an ensemble cast on the poster, the individual actors had been shot in at different times in different studios because whoever made that poster forgot to adjust the catch lights in the eyes. So, so you look at the eyes and you go like, okay, well, that's an octabox, that's a rectangular softbox, blah, 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 right?
Exactly.
And so my daughter asked me, like, how do you know this? And so I taught her how to read catch lights, and as a photographer, as a portrait photographer, to me, this is like, it's super important. I spend a lot of time thinking about catch lights,
Exactly.
And so, I taught her the difference between, the catch light created by an octabox compared to a beauty dish, because you can see a little black spot and blah, 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 And so now, quite often when we look at she analyzes it, and she'll be able to say, like, when we go to a supermarket, there's like a poster, she goes like, they weren't shot in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah, but it makes your life a lot broader, actually, if you know these kinds of things, these tiny things that you know how to observe things in real life. I also heard that some people even don't look at clouds, for example, that they don't look at the sky, never look at, sometimes people just have to learn to look at things around them, and that's sometimes so surprising to me that so many people never do that. So, and probably if they don't do that, they are also never able to create something beautiful, because you don't know how to observe and how to look around you, and
well,
things
absolutely.
like that.
Sky's another pet peeve. This is another thing I taught my daughter, actually. So here in the UK, we have a lot of what they call estate agents or realtors, property, whatever you call it, I don't know what you call it, like, estate agents, basically like shops where they sell properties, blah, blah, blah. And the tradition in the UK is that they always have pictures of the properties that are for sale or for rent, are in the shop window. Right. And so you have lots of these pictures. And so that's what people do. You walk up to an estate agent, you look at the windows and you go, oh, I like this house, but it's 2.5 million and I can't afford it. And so you look at all, and so you have all the details of the properties and a picture. And of course, these pictures have to look really nice. So they're all pretty much, they all have fake skies. They all have sky replacements done.
Yes,
because this is the UK, and, sunny, beautiful skies.
Always cloudy. Yeah,
it's always cloudy. So it's not like all the estate agents go out on that one day in the year when there's a beautiful sky and photograph all the properties. Obviously, But the funny thing that my daughter and I often do is, like, we look at these pictures and we go, aha, Photoshop sky number 5. There it is.
Yeah, you recognize the skies. Yeah, me too.
Because they're the same.
Oh, that's that sky. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They should have at least made some photos of skies themselves that you don't recognize the skies from Photoshop.
Yeah, at least move it around, mirror it, or change the size of it.
Yes, exactly. That's also possible. But yeah, probably if they only know that one trick in Photoshop, maybe that's the only reason why they pay their monthly subscription, because they can replace skies.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's a funny thing. But I think this is the important thing. I think as an artist, is just generally is to be able to again, so backwards engineer things.
Yeah.
And actually, what it does, it teaches you a lot about how to do something. So most of the time, I don't really see the point of keeping any secrets, because
there's no reason. You just have to teach everyone your the things you know, because it makes everyone's lives better if you know a little bit more about backgrounds of how things are made, and I think also now it's even more important to tell people, because then they appreciate your work also more, because you can make things with AI so quickly. People need to know what you do as a designer, how you come up with ideas and how you create your things, how much time you spend on it, on what kind of details you spend time on, and then people also start to appreciate it. But now, when you don't show it, it's no one will know.
And I think this is of course the danger, because now very often, or very easily, people could come to the conclusion that it's just done with AI. Yeah, it's just AI. Yeah. And you go like, well, actually no, because it took me 3 months to shoot that damn thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think this is also a thing where history tends to repeat itself, because I'm pretty sure people would have had the exact same discussions when Photoshop first arrived on the scene. It's like, now you don't have to do any of it anymore, because now you can do it all on the computer.
Yeah, I think so. But this one touches really. So, but in Photoshop you still had to create something yourself. But now with AI you just have to fill in a prompt. So I'm always wondering how far it will go until people think, okay, we don't have to create anymore. So if you don't have to create anymore, will people still be creative enough to start creating again in another way? Maybe start painting, or because I think it's a human thing to want, that people always want to be able to create something. I think make music, or like now you can play everything on Spotify or on Apple Music, but now people start buying records again, like LPs, and maybe I think people always want to create something real. Like maybe they go to crafts courses, or something like that. I'm not sure. how far it will go.
I thought about this the other day, actually, and I kind of thought, I was getting a little bit worried because, there's a... So I read an article about the potential impact of artificial intelligence on our brains in the future, and it was not so much based around creative applications of AI. It was more about things like you don't write any emails or letters anymore because you just give AI some prompts and it does it for you. You don't write any essays anymore. Blah blah. And I think it was all about. It was actually around university education and the need to write essays and what that does to your brain, especially once you're still in a developmental phase and so on. And so one of the conclusions was that it will have an impact on human brain development because we're now not stretching our intellect anymore by doing these things ourselves. Creating the reasoning. One of the examples was that one of the things that's been very noticeable in universities around the world is that, of course, students have embraced ChatGPT and AI, and of course, create a lot of their written essays and written work using AI tools. And the interesting thing was that it's very noticeable because when you get an essay that's been written by AI, and I think the thing was they were saying, well, AI recognition tools are actually nonsense. They really don't work very well. A lot of these AI things are so good at making it sound human that it's almost impossible to detect. Anyway, the major difference, though, in the classroom, these students had no ammunition to hold a debate about that subject because they didn't actually write the whole thing, didn't go through the thought processes,
Exactly.
and all the rest of it.
Just reading your own piece instead of making it yourself is really you really get a decline in the way your brain works. I think it goes maybe. Do you use ChatGPT, for example, like writing things sometimes? I use it as a tool sometimes but you immediately notice so when I start writing things myself again, sometimes I just feel like I have to write it myself. Of course, when you write a book or something like that, you feel like, I've worked with ChatGPT a little bit too much, because you have to get into the flow again, and your brain goes quickly to, I'm going to ask ChatGPT, and then you have to tell yourself, no, I'm not going to do it right now. It's going quickly, I think, especially when you're not when you're still a student or on school.
That's why my handwriting has turned out to be absolutely terrible, because I've noticed that since I've been using keyboards for the last decades, my handwriting has turned to shit, basically, so now I'm forcing myself to. I only write with fountain pens, ink pens, because it slows me down. I have to write slower. I have to think more about it, and therefore I can force myself to write more. I can force myself to write in a way that I can actually read it. This is the thing, But
with notes, maybe when note taking also. Don't you have? What I also have when I grab my phone to take a note.
Yeah,
I forget it already when I grab my phone, but when I grab a pen and I write it down, I just remember it. But once you get your phone, you already forgot the idea, because there's something else like a notification on your phone, or writing it down always makes it stick more to your brain.
So I use a thing called Notion, which I really like. It's like a system that allows you to create almost like projects out of ideas. It's just sort of a way of almost like cataloging information, and then putting it together into like projects, and so it does help me a lot. And the good thing is that you can access it on all your devices in like real time, and it's pretty cool. It's not necessarily that complicated. It's pretty straightforward. You can also build your own pages, depending on what it is that you do. So it's very flexible, and stuff like that. But the one thing I did until fairly recently was that I would write my daily planners by hand. And so, what I would do is I would, at the beginning of the week, so on a Sunday night, I would sit down and I would literally draw out the days of the week across 2 pages in a notebook that I had. And then I would basically write in all the things that I knew I had on over that week. Okay. And I would take them from like a yearly planner that I had written on before. And so now I write in all of the appointments, all the different things, the meetings, whatever that I had to do in that week. And just by writing them out, they would already be in my head. So these are just the weekly things. And then every morning, what I would do, this was actually something that was born in the pandemic, because the pandemic was one of these crazy times. So I get up, and the first thing I do is I grab some coffee, I sit down at my dining room table, and I take my plan out, and I literally write out on that day what I had to do. And just the act of actually physically writing that down meant that throughout the day, I was a lot more aware of the things that I had to do that day, rather than just having an automated calendar, So it definitely helps, you're right.
Yeah, I think they also did a lot of research about that it really, really sticks to your brain a lot more than when you just type it out, or when you put it on the screen. Yeah, it's really. I bought a Remarkable. I think I don't have it here, but like this e-paper note.
Oh, I've seen those. Thing. Yeah.
That's funny actually. Yeah, it's a bit expensive, but for just a note-taking thing. But on the other hand, it was this kind of gadget that I saw so many times with people who attended to my courses, that I thought, okay, I really, really want to have one, and I use it all the time actually to write things. I think it's in my bag now, but it's just very easy. You just have a pen, and then you can draw on it, and you can make pages, and it feels like paper, but it's all there in one thing. Because sometimes I wrote it down on paper, and then I wrote it down in this notebook and that notebook, and then they're all over the place. I threw pages away, and with this thing, you always have it with you and still have the paper feeling.
Yeah,
really fun.
I saw those, and I remember for the longest time I used to think, well, what's the point? You could just use an iPad for that. But then I actually tried one, and it really feels completely different.
Yeah, and it's also doesn't have the light in your face, but it can still synchronize. But you can also go to Word, for example, or send a PDF or a website to the Remarkable, and you can read on it, or you can make notes on it, or it's a really funny device actually. Yeah, a bit limited, but that makes it so fun.
But that's the thing. I mean, limitations are really, the cornerstone of creativity. I think this is where, I always think that by limiting yourself, you're actually pushing your creativity forward.
Yeah. As a creative device, it's amazing. Yeah, and you can even send it to AI to write it down again. It's like a handwriting recognition, for example. You can say, okay, write this out, make a summary, or that's also possible, of course. Yeah.
So with AI. And editing on mobile devices, where is this going over the next 10 years? What's your prediction?
Yeah, that's so difficult. Yeah, there are a lot of people very, very. When you look on LinkedIn, or you have some AI influencers, and they always seem to know so well what's going to be. Graphic designers are going to lose their jobs. Photoshop is going away, but I think it's not so clear in which direction it goes. But I think, well, people will keep on editing more and more on their mobile devices, especially since young people take their experiences with them. So there will be more focus on mobile devices, also from manufacturers like Adobe, for example, but also other companies. And I think designing will be more easier. Actually, it will. I think the computer will help you more in the creative process, and it will also be much easier to just work on your mobile phone, because AI can select things based on a prompt, or just based on a topic, select all the cars in this image and delete them, for example, or select all the. It's already going that way a little bit, and these kinds of tools will make it easier to go more easily from phone to desktop, and but also to create on desktop. I think it will be way more easier for beginners, people who are not used to big software like Photoshop, but they will still probably use Photoshop because of all the possibilities that you have in the freedom and the layers and the non-destructive editing. I think that's a big opportunity for Adobe also to develop the software more and more in that direction, and they're already doing that actually with making things so much easier, like the wire deleting from all the wires in your image, or deleting all the tourists in your image, or selecting things so much easier. It's going more and more in that direction, I think. So yeah, so I think there's always a place for graphic designers because of the ideas that they have. So they won't disappear. I think there's always a need for photographers because, yeah, people want to have photos of their special occasions, like weddings. Of course, you're not going to let them create by AI. And so there's always room for creative people. Yeah.
Fantastic, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being the guest of the Camera Shake podcast this week.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was very nice talking to you.
Okay, folks, that is it for today. What a fantastic conversation with Rob de Winter. So many insights into mobile creativity, AI tools, and how Photoshop is evolving in 2025 and beyond. As always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode I think you'll enjoy. Check out episode 267, where I spoke with Jesus Ramirez. It's a great companion to today's chat. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us keep creating and bring you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you listening to the audio version, did you know that there's a full video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest work in full Technicolor? Just head over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll find all past episodes there. And if you're already on YouTube, well, drop us a comment, hit that like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach photographers and creatives all over the world. Don't forget to sign up for the Camera Shake newsletter at www.camerashakepodcast.com for bonus content and all the latest updates. So thank you for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark your calendars, diaries, whatever the hell you kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.